What if the worst night of your life was actually the opening scene of your greatest story? Stick with me, because by the time this is over, you're going to question everything you think you know about hitting rock bottom. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. My name is Peter Austin, and 14 months ago, I was worth $4.2 million. I know what you're thinking. So what happened? Everything happened. In the span of 72 hours, my construction firm collapsed under a federal contract dispute I didn't see coming. My bank accounts were frozen faster than you can say due process, and the house I'd spent 19 years paying for was gone. Swallowed by a lender who didn't blink twice. 72 hours. I've had grocery trips that took longer. I was 61 years old. My knees hurt in the mornings. I needed reading glasses to see my own phone, and suddenly, I was starting over. From nothing. With nothing. But here's the part that really gets me. Here's the part I still wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about. It wasn't the money. It was my son. His name is Daniel. Danny, I used to call him, back when he still let me. He's 34 now, lives in a nice colonial house in Naperville with his wife Rebecca and their 2 kids. I helped with the down payment on that house. Not bragging, just setting the scene. So when the walls came down, I drove to Naperville, 2 hours with everything I owned crammed into the back seat of a 2019 Buick. When I knocked on that door, I wasn't asking for a mansion. I wasn't asking for a handout. I just needed a couch, maybe a week, enough time to think straight. Daniel opened the door and looked at me the way you look at a car accident. Like he felt bad, but he really wished he hadn't seen it. "Dad," he said, already stepping slightly outside, already lowering his voice so Rebecca wouldn't hear. "What are you doing here? My house is gone, Danny." He winced, actually winced, like the word gone physically pained him. "I know. I heard. I'm really sorry about that, I am. But this isn't a great time. This kid whose Little League registration I paid for 17 years straight. This kid whose college tuition I worked double contracts for. This kid who wore a suit to my company's launch party and told everyone, that his dad built things that lasted. Danny," I said slowly, "it's Tuesday. Rebecca she's not really comfortable with. I'm your father." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. Louder than the phone call from my lawyer. Louder than the bank rep reading me the foreclosure terms. Louder than all of it. He looked down at his shoes. "I know," he said. "I'm sorry, Dad." And he closed the door. "Now, I need you to stay with me right here. Because this is the moment. This is the moment that changes everything. And not in the way you'd expect." I walked back to my car. I sat down, I looked at the steering wheel for a long time. And then, I laughed. Not a happy laugh. Not the healthy kind. I laughed the way a man laughs when the universe has made it absolutely abundantly clear that it has a sense of humor and he does not. I reclined my seat, pulled my jacket over my chest like a blanket, and I slept in that car in front of a house I helped buy, in a neighborhood I helped my son get into. You cannot write this stuff. The seats in a 2019 Buick, by the way, are not built for sleeping. I'm just putting that out there. Whoever designed those headrests had clearly never lost everything. There's a product feedback form somewhere that really needed my input. I woke up the next morning to a knocking on my window. My first thought was, cop. My second thought was, great. Now I'm getting a vagrancy citation in my own son's neighborhood. My third thought, when I actually opened my eyes, was that the man standing outside my window did not look like any cop I'd ever seen. He was somewhere in his 60s, dressed in a charcoal suit at 7 in the morning, shoes so polished I could probably see my own disappointed face in them. He had the posture of a man who had never once in his life stood in line. He knocked again, 3 precise, unhurried knocks, and waited. I rolled down the window. "Mr. Austin?" he said. I blinked. "Yeah?" "My name is Gerald. I am the personal assistant to Mr. Raymond Holt." He paused, letting the name land. When it didn't, because I had no idea who Raymond Holt was, he continued without missing a beat. "Mr. Raymond Holt was," he continued, without missing a beat. "Mr. Raymond Holt. Holt has requested the pleasure of your company at his estate this morning. He is quite specific about the timing." I looked at him, then I looked at myself. Jacket, blanket, creased clothes, hair that had clearly negotiated its own peace deal overnight. I'm sorry, I said. Who sent you? Mr. Raymond Holt, sir. And who is Raymond Holt? Gerald blinked, and I got the distinct impression that this was perhaps the first time in his professional life someone had asked him that question. He is, Gerald paused, as if selecting the right word from a very expensive catalog. A man of considerable consequence. He is also, I'm afraid, dying. He has perhaps 3 weeks, according to his physicians. He is finalizing his will and estate arrangements, and he has asked, very specifically, to speak with you before the documents are signed. The morning air was cold. Somewhere down the street a sprinkler system kicked on. I could hear birds, normal Tuesday morning sounds. Nothing about this was a normal Tuesday morning. Gerald, I said carefully, I'm going to be real with you. I just slept in my car. I have no money, no house, no business, and my son just turned me away last night. I don't know a Raymond Holt. I have no idea why a dying billionaire wants to see me, and I look absolutely terrible. Gerald looked at me steadily. Yes, sir. Mr. Holt was informed of your current circumstances, he said, and I quote. Gerald reached into his breast pocket and produced a small, cream-colored card. He read from it without expression. Tell Peter Austin that what he's been through doesn't disqualify him. It's precisely why I want to see him. I read the card myself. Then I read it again. He knows what I've been through. Mr. Holt, Gerald said, folding the card neatly back into his pocket, knows quite a bit about you, sir. And right there, is when the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Not from cold, not from surprise, from something older than both of those things. Instinct. I followed Gerald's car, a black Mercedes that made my Buick feel personally insulted, for 45 minutes outside the city until we turned through iron gates onto a private road lined with oak trees so old and tall they felt like a statement. The kind of trees that were already standing when your grandparents were born. The estate at the end of the road was the kind of place that didn't show up on Google Maps, the kind of place that didn't need to. I stepped out of my car. Gravel crunched under my shoes. The morning light came over the roofline like something painted. Gerald turned to me at the front entrance and said, One final thing, Mr. Austin. Mr. Holt will tell you something today that will be very difficult to believe. He asks only that you hear him out fully before you respond. I looked at him. What's he going to tell me? Gerald held the door open. His face gave nothing away. That, he said quietly, is for Mr. Holt to say. I walked inside. And nothing would ever be the same again. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you, genuinely. The inside of Raymond Holt's estate was the kind of place that made you suddenly aware of every poor decision you'd ever made in your life. Not because it was showy. That's the thing. It wasn't gold fixtures and oil paintings of horses. It was quiet money, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. Dark wood paneling. Books, actual books, thousands of them, floor to ceiling in the hallway alone. The air smelled like leather and something faintly floral, like someone had cut fresh flowers in a room 3 doors away and the whole house already knew about it. Gerald walked me through it all without a word, his shoes making no sound on the marble. Mine, on the other hand, squeaked twice, loudly. The house judged me. We stopped outside a set of double doors at the end of a long corridor. Gerald knocked twice, waited, then turned to me with the measured calm of a man who had spent decades being unreadable. He tires easily, Gerald said. If he closes his eyes, do not be alarmed. He is listening. Great, I said. Anything else? Gerald considered this. Don't touch the desk. Before I could ask why, he opened the doors. Raymond Holt was not what I expected. I don't know what I expected exactly. Something more dramatic, maybe. A shrunken man in silk pajamas hooked up to machines gasping poetically toward a window. That's how dying billionaires look in movies. Raymond Holt looked like someone's retired geography teacher. He was thin, yes, and pale in the way that has nothing to do with sunlight and everything to do with what's happening inside. He sat in a wingback chair near the window, dressed in a simple navy cardigan, a wool blanket across his lap. His hair was white and neatly combed. His eyes, when they found mine, were sharp. Startlingly sharp. The eyes of a man whose body was checking out, but whose mind had not yet received the memo. He looked at me for a long moment without speaking. Then he said, "You look terrible, Peter." I blinked. "Good morning to you too," I said. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. almost a smile. Sit down. I sat in the chair across from him. Between us was a small table with 2 cups of coffee already waiting. I looked at the coffee. I looked at him. I had Gerald prepare it before he left to get you, Raymond said. I assumed you'd need it. You assumed right. I picked it up. It was still hot. I didn't even question it. When a dying stranger offers you perfectly timed coffee after you've slept in your car, you drink the coffee. That's just survival instinct. Raymond watched me with quiet amusement. Then he folded his hands in his lap and said, I owe you an explanation. You owe me a lot of things, I said, starting with why you know my name. I know more than your name. He reached to the side table and lifted a manila folder. He held it out to me. I know everything, Peter. I took the folder, I opened it, and I stopped breathing. Inside that folder was my life. Not a summary, not a report. My life. Photographs, documents, records. There was a photo of me at my company's groundbreaking in 2009, shovel in hand, grinning like a man who believed in things. There was a copy of Danny's college enrollment paperwork, with my signature on the financial guarantee. There was a photograph of my house, my actual house before the bank took it. Front porch, flower bed Margaret planted the first spring we moved in, the slightly crooked mailbox I always said I'd fix and never did. My hands were not entirely steady. How do you have this? I asked. I've been watching you, Raymond said, simply, calmly. Like that was a perfectly normal sentence. For a very long time. The room got very quiet. Raymond, I said slowly, setting the folder down. I need you to understand that depending on your next sentence, this conversation could go in a very different direction. He almost smiled again. 39 years, Peter. I've been watching you for 39 years. The number hit me like a door swung open into my face. 39. I stopped. Did the math. That's I was 22. Yes. I didn't have anything worth watching at 22. I was broke and working a forklift in a distribution warehouse in Cincinnati. I know, Raymond said. That's where I first saw you. He leaned back. His eyes went to the window briefly, like a man watching a film reel only he could see. It was February, he said. I was 38. I'd just closed the acquisition that made me my first $100 million. I was driving back from dinner. Too fast, too confident, probably too much whiskey if I'm being honest with myself. He paused. My car went off the road on Route 32, into a ditch, in the middle of the night, in the middle of winter. I stared at him. There was no one around, he continued. I had a head injury. I couldn't find my phone. The car wouldn't start. The temperature was dropping. He looked back at me, and then a truck pulled over. Something stirred at the edges of my memory. Old, vague, like trying to remember a dream from last week. You got out, Raymond said. You didn't know me. You had no reason to stop. You pulled me out of that car, put me in your truck, drove 40 minutes to the nearest hospital, sat in the waiting room until a doctor came out, and then, he paused, you left. Before I could even get your name. The room was absolutely silent. And then, slowly, like a photograph developing, I remembered. A dark road, a car half buried in a ditch, a man who could barely stand. I remembered the cold. I remembered the waiting room chairs, orange plastic. I remembered thinking I'd be late for my shift and calculating whether my supervisor was going to be reasonable about it. That was you, I whispered. That was me. I sat back in my chair. I never thought about that again. I was late for work, my supervisor docked my pay, and I thought the whole thing was just a bad Tuesday. For you, perhaps, Raymond said quietly. For me, it was the night I decided the rest of my life needed to mean something. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, sweet story, Peter. Billionaire grateful to the man who saved his life. He leaves you the money. You live happily ever after, roll credits. Hold on. We are nowhere near the end of this. So you watched me for 39 years out of gratitude, I said. I appreciate that, truly. But Raymond, my business didn't just fail. Federal contract disputes don't come out of nowhere. Banks don't freeze accounts overnight without pressure from somewhere. I leaned forward. What happened to me wasn't bad luck, was it? Raymond held my gaze. He didn't look away, and he didn't answer immediately, which I have learned in 61 years of living, is itself an answer. No, he finally said. It wasn't. The word landed in the room like something dropped from a great height. Raymond, there are 12 men, he said, myself included, though I am no longer active. 11 others, powerful men, Men who move things from behind the arrangement of other things. We have been running something for 30 years. A study, you might call it. A selection process. He closed his eyes briefly. Every few years we identify a candidate, someone with character, real character, not the performed kind, and we test them. I felt the cold start somewhere at the base of my spine and move upward. We remove everything, Raymond continued, systematically, carefully, business, assets, security, and then we watch what they do in the wreckage, who they become when there's nothing left to protect. I was gripping the armrest of my chair. The others, I said. My voice was very controlled. I was proud of that. What happened to the others? Raymond's expression shifted into something heavier. Some begged, he said. Some stole. One man disappeared entirely. We think he's in Costa Rica. One had a breakdown. One sued everyone he could think of. He paused. One took his own life. The silence after that was not the comfortable kind. And me? I asked. You, Raymond said, slept in your car. He said it like those 4 words explained everything. Like they were the answer to a question the universe had been asking for decades. You didn't rage, he said. You didn't collapse. You didn't go looking for someone to blame or someone to rescue you. You just, he searched for the word endured, with your dignity perfectly intact, like a man who understood on some deep level that this was not the end of his story. My jaw was tight. Or maybe I was just too tired to fall apart. Perhaps, Raymond said, but tired men with no dignity don't hold themselves the way you held yourself last night. Gerald watched you for 3 hours before he knocked on your window. I turned my head slowly. Gerald was watching me all night? From a respectable distance. That is not as comforting as you think it is, Raymond. He reached over to the desk, carefully, the movement costing him something, and picked up a sealed envelope. He set it on the table between us. That, he said, is a letter of introduction to the other 11 men. My attorneys will formalize everything this week. The will gives you controlling interest in my estate, the investments, the properties, the influence. He paused. And the seat, I repeated, in the group. My seat. The one that decides who the next candidate is. I looked at the envelope, then at him. You want me to decide, he said. That's different. I stood up slowly, walked to the window. Outside, the oak tree stood in the morning light, ancient and unbothered. I thought about the forklift in Cincinnati, the orange waiting room chairs, Margaret's flower bed, Danny's face in the doorway, the headrest of a 2019 Buick at 2 a.m. I thought about the man Raymond said had taken his own life. I turned around. Who are the 11 men? I asked. Raymond looked at me with those sharp, tired eyes. That, he said, depends on whether you pick up the envelope. I looked at it sitting there on the table. Small, cream-colored, like the card Gerald had read to me this morning. I looked at it for a long time. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do. But it's what keeps this whole thing running, so thank you for real. I picked up the envelope, not because I'd decided anything, not because I was ready. I picked it up because my hand moved before my brain finished the argument. And honestly, after everything that had happened in the last 72 hours, I had stopped pretending I was the one in charge of my own life. It was heavy. Heavier than paper had any business being. I turned it over. My name was on the front, written by hand in ink so dark it looked permanent, like a decision already made by someone who knew me better than I knew myself. Peter, Raymond said quietly from his chair, before you open that, there's something else. I looked up. His expression had changed. The measured calm was still there, but underneath it was something that looked almost like guilt. And on a man who had spent 30 years engineering the destruction of innocent people's lives in the name of a character study, guilt was not a small thing to witness. One of the 11 men, he said, has a history with you that I did not know about when you were selected. The room temperature dropped 2 degrees. Or maybe that was just me. What kind of history? I asked. I discovered it 4 months ago. When I found out, he stopped, pressed his lips together. It changes the nature of what was done to you. Significantly. I set the envelope back down on the table. Raymond. Talk. He exhaled slowly, like a man releasing something he'd been holding for a very long time. His name is Walter Briggs. Now I need you to understand something about the name Walter Briggs. To most people, Walter Briggs is a name on a building. Briggs Capital Group, headquartered in Chicago, 32nd floor, name in brushed gold letters above the elevator bank. The kind of man who gets profiled in magazines that other rich men leave on their coffee tables to impress other rich men. To me, Walter Briggs was something else entirely. Walter Briggs was my business partner for 11 years. My original business partner, before the firm became Austin Construction. Before any of it. We started together in a shared office space in 2001, with 2 desks, 1 printer that jammed every 3rd page, and enough ambition to embarrass us both in hindsight. We built the foundation of everything I had together. And then in 2008, a year before we were set to go public, Walter quietly sold his stake, took his money, walked out, and never looked back. No fight. No falling out. He just left. Called it a lifestyle change. Said he wanted to go a different direction. I shook his hand, wished him well, and spent the next 14 years building everything alone. I thought he just got bored. I thought wrong. Walter was the one who brought your name to the group, Raymond said. 12 years ago, he nominated you as a candidate. I heard the words. I understood the words individually. Collectively, they were doing something terrible to my chest. He nominated me, I repeated. Yes. His name, the man I started my company with, he sat in a room with 11 powerful men and said, "Let's destroy Peter Austin," and everyone just nodded. It wasn't framed that way. Raymond. My voice came out very quiet. Don't manage me right now. He closed his mouth. Nodded once. The grace of a man who understood when to stop talking. I walked back to the window. The oak trees were still out there, still unbothered. I envied them deeply. 11 years. 11 years of building something together. Holiday parties at my house. Walter at Danny's christening, holding him like the man knew what he was doing. Margaret making her pot roast, because Walter always said nobody cooked like Margaret. 11 years of phone calls and handshakes and the specific trust that only exists between 2 people who build something from nothing together. And the whole time, there was something in him that looked at me and thought, I wonder how much this man can take. I pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of my nose and breathed. Why? I finally asked. Did he tell you why? Raymond was quiet for a moment. Walter told the group you were the most genuinely decent man he'd ever known, Raymond said. He said, and I'm giving you his exact words now. He said if anyone can survive it and come out clean on the other side, it's Peter. He said it like a compliment. I laughed. I couldn't help it. That specific unhinged what is happening laugh that I'd laughed in my car. Outside Danny's house, it came out of me like something escaping. A compliment, I said. He destroyed my life as a compliment. I'm not defending it. Good. Because there is no defense for it. I came back to my chair. I sat down. I picked up the coffee. Cold now, but I drank it anyway because I needed something to do with my hands. And I thought, not about the money. Not about the estate or the will or the 11 men or the seat at the table. I thought about the man in the Costa Rica. I thought about the one who'd had the breakdown. I thought about the one who had taken his own life. I thought about all these men who had stood at the edge of their own wreckage and looked down and made a decision about who they were going to be from that point forward. And then I thought about Walter Briggs on the 32nd floor of a glass building with his name in gold above the elevator. And I thought about the envelope. Raymond, I said, what exactly does the seat give me? Access, he said, to the group's collective resources. Their network, their influence. These are men who move inside the walls of things. Government contracts, financial institutions, media. Combined, they have more quiet power than most people would believe. The person I'd be choosing to test, that decision would be entirely yours. The group doesn't override the nominating member. I nodded slowly. So theoretically, I said, I could nominate anyone. Raymond looked at me carefully. Anyone. And the group would move against that person, systematically, the way they moved against me. Yes, I let the silence sit there for a moment, nice and comfortable, while Raymond watched me with those sharp eyes and probably the first genuine uncertainty he'd felt in 30 years. I want to meet them, I said, all 11 in person, before I sign anything or agree to anything. That can be arranged. And I want Walter Briggs in that room. Raymond held my gaze. Peter, I'm not going to do anything dramatic, Raymond. I'm 61 years old and my knees hurt. I'm not going to flip a table. I paused. I just need to look him in the eye. Can you give me that? A long moment passed, Then Raymond nodded. 3 days later, I walked into a private dining room on the 44th floor of a building in downtown Chicago that doesn't appear on any commercial directory. Floor-to-ceiling windows. City laid out below like a map of everything that was possible if you knew the right people. 11 men stood when I entered. They were older, mostly, well-dressed in the quiet way that Raymond had been well-dressed. The kind of men who looked like the background of important photographs. They looked at me with a mixture of things: curiosity, assessment, something that might have been respect. And at the far end of the table, hands clasped in front of him, not quite meeting my eyes, Walter Briggs. He'd aged. We both had. His hair was silver now, cut close. He was heavier through the shoulders, successful in the way that settles into a man's posture when he's had enough years of being right about things. I walked the length of the table. Slowly, nobody spoke. The city glittered 44 floors below us, and nobody said a word. I stopped in front of him. He looked up, and for a moment, just a moment, I saw it. Behind all the polish, and the silver hair, and the tailored jacket, I saw the man who'd sat across from me at a desk with a jamming printer in 2001. I saw the man who'd held my son on the day he was born. I saw someone who had done something unforgivable and had been living inside that fact for 12 years. "Walter," I said. "Peter." His voice was steady, but his jaw was tight. "I owe you. You owe me everything," I said. "We both know that, so I'm only going to say this once, and I need you to hear every single word." He nodded. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the cream-colored envelope. I set it on the table in front of him. "I'm not going to do this to someone else," I said. "I'm not going to sit in a room and choose a person, a real person with a life and a family and a house they love, and decide that they're strong enough to survive being destroyed. I don't care how noble the reason is. I don't care about the legacy of it or the selection process or what it supposedly produces." I looked at all of them, slowly, one by one. You don't get to decide what breaks a person. You don't get to make that call. The room was absolutely still. "The man who took his own life," I said. "What was his name?" A pause. Then one of the men near the window said quietly, "Marcus. Marcus Del Rey." "Did he have kids?" Silence. "Did he have kids?" "2 daughters," the man said. I nodded. "Then this ends," I said. "Not just for me. This group, this process, this whatever you call it. It ends. That's my condition for accepting Raymond's estate. You dissolve the selection process, permanently. And you take the resources, all that collective power and influence you've spent 30 years building, and you redirect it. There are men and women in this country who are losing everything right now through no fault of their own. Real people, not candidates, not subjects." I straightened my jacket. "You want to find out what people are made of? Fund them. Back them. Watch what they build when someone actually believes in them. That'll tell you more about character than destruction ever will." Nobody moved. Then Walter Briggs, slowly, like a man making a decision he should have made a long time ago, pulled out his chair and sat down. He put his head in his hands, and one by one, quietly, the others sat down too. I took Raymond's seat. Not to run the selection process. There was no more selection process. I took it because 11 powerful men had just agreed. Some willingly, some because they recognized they had no real alternative, to become something different. And somebody needed to hold them to that. Somebody who had stood in the wreckage and knew what it cost. Somebody who had slept in a 2019 Buick and woke up to find out it was the beginning and not the end. Raymond passed away 11 days later. Gerald called me. I drove out to the estate and sat in the wingback chair by the window for a while. Just the two of us in that room that smelled like leather and flowers 3 doors away. I thought about a dark road in February, a man in a ditch, a kid who stopped because he didn't know not to. I thought about how the smallest moments are always the ones that decide everything. As for Danny, he called me 6 weeks after that morning in Naperville. He'd heard, somehow, the way these things travel, that his father's circumstances had changed. "Dad," he said, "I've been thinking about what happened, and I want to—" "Danny," I said, "I love you. You're my son, and that will never change." I paused, "But I need you to sit with what you did for a little while longer before we talk about moving past it. Can you do that?" A long silence. "Yeah," he said. His voice was different, smaller. "Yeah, I can do that." "Good," I said. "I'll call you at Christmas." I hung up. Outside the window of my new office, 32nd floor, different building, no gold letters. I didn't need them. The city moved the way cities always move. Urgent and indifferent, and full of people who were one bad Tuesday away from finding out who they really were. I knew who I was. Took me 61 years, a collapsed business, a foreclosed house, one deeply uncomfortable car seat, and a dying billionaire with a manila folder full of my life. But I knew. And sometimes, just sometimes, rock bottom isn't where your story ends. It's where it finally properly begins. If you like this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.